You think you know cavalry? Horses, armor, charges through history books. But there's a field near Smolensk where the math stops working. July 4th, 1610, 30,000 Russians and Swedes on one side, 6,000 Poles on the other. The outnumbered force wins. Not barely, completely. They shatter an army 5 times their size in 5 hours. This is Klushino, and the men who did it wore wings. 1610 sits in the middle of what historians call the Time of Troubles, 15 years of civil war that started when the last Rurik Tsar died childless in 1598. Pretenders crawl out, claiming to be the murdered son of Ivan the Terrible. The first false Dmitry rules for a year before Boyar Vasily Shuisky murders him in May 1606 and crowns himself Tsar Vasily IV. Then a second false Dmitry appears, backed by Polish magnates, laying siege to Moscow from the village of Tushino. Shuisky panics. He signs a treaty with Sweden for military help. That brings Poland officially into the war in 1609. King Zygmunt III Vasa marches his army to besiege Smolensk, the fortress city that's been Russian since 1514. Smolensk sits on the road to Moscow. Take it, you crack Russia open. Hetman Polny Karani, field crown hetman, since 1588, when he grabbed an Austrian banner at the Battle of Bydzina and took a musket ball in the knee that crippled him for life. He learned war under John Zamoyski, speaks French, Italian, German, reads Caesar and Cicero in Latin, writes his own memoirs, 40 battles, never lost. A diplomat who thinks before he swings. He's 63 years old and he doesn't want this war. He argued against supporting pretenders, against invading Russia at all, but the king gave the order and Żółkiewski obeys. Polish-Lithuanian army of 12,000 arrives at dawn, tries to attack, but Waluyev digs in, encircled, trapped. The main Russian relief force under Prince Dmitry Ivanovich Shuisky is days away, 35,000 men. 5,000 are foreign mercenaries under Swedish commander Jacob Pontus de la Gardie. Flemish, French, Irish, German, Spanish, English, Scottish, professional soldiers. The advance unit fails to warn Shuisky they've found the Polish army. Shuisky doesn't know the real numbers. Neither does Russia understand how badly they outnumber the enemy. The hetman counts his cavalry. He trusts them. July 3rd, he splits his force. Half stays besieging the camp. The rest, the mobile units, march at night toward Shuisky's army near the village of Klushino. If you value documented Eastern European military history like this, subscribe. It's the best way to support our work. Also comment from which city you're hearing this from. This script is researched and factual, using sources from the Polish Army Museum's Battle of Klushino archive records, published June 25, 1610, and Samuel Maskiewicz's first-hand diary account documented in the Pamiętniki manuscript collection at Wrocław University, published in 1961, which provides eyewitness testimony from a hussar who charged at Klushino and recorded specific tactical details that match archaeological findings from the battlefield excavations. Now back to the information. 5,500 winged cavalry, 400 Cossack infantry on the left. 200 more infantry and 2 cannon arrive late, against 30,000 Russians and 5,000 mercenaries. The battlefield is flat agricultural land near Klushino village, about 150 kilometers west of Moscow. A high wooden fence reinforced with fieldworks cuts across it. Village fences, improvised barriers. The Russians position infantry behind them, pikemen, musketeers, arquebusiers. Second line of cavalry behind. Left wing has fewer fences. Russian artillery stays in the camp, never fires a shot. The mercenaries hold the right flank northwest. Main Russian force holds center and left southeast. De la Gardie commands as professionals. They're good. They fought wars across Europe. Some say they whistled during charges to terrify enemy horses. Others say that's impossible in battle noise. What isn't debated is the armor. Cuirass, spalders, bavors, arm bracers, lobster tail helmet, lightweight steel, polished mirror bright so it gleams, red and gold decoration. Animal pelts, over shoulders, leopard, tiger, wolf. They look like something from a nightmare. The copia lance is the killing tool. Hollow fir wood, 19 feet long, weighs under 3 kilograms, longer than enemy pikes. Metal tip. The butt fits into a cup on the saddle, one-use weapon. It shatters on impact. Returning with an intact lance after a charge is considered shameful. After the lance breaks, they draw the sabla saber, curved for slashing. They carry 2 wheel-lock pistols in saddle holsters, a conquer thrusting sword, warhammer, sometimes a light axe. Their horses carry over 100 kilograms, walk hundreds of kilometers, then charge instantly. Death penalty for selling a hussar horse outside the Commonwealth. These aren't parade soldiers. They're the deadliest shock cavalry Europe has produced since armored knights went extinct. The battle starts before dawn. Samuel Maskiewicz, hussar from Prince Janusz Paricki's Royal Regiment, keeps a diary. He's there. He writes everything down. His company charges 8 to 10 times that morning. The hussars hammer the fortified Russian positions. They can't break through the fences. Infantry behind barriers pour musket fire. The charges fail. Again. Arms and armor damaged. Strength ebbing. Shuisky sees exhaustion. He orders a raider cavalry unit to counterattack. The raiders use caracal tactics, European cavalry doctrine, where horsemen fire pistols, then wheel away. It fails catastrophically. The hussars don't wheel away. They fire once, then close to melee. Steel meets steel. The Russian cavalry is slaughtered. Left flank breaks. Confusion spreads. Russian ranks shatter. They're pushed back toward camp gates. The mercenaries under de la Gardie are professionals. They resist for hours. Then the Polish infantry and 2 cannon arrive. The mercenaries abandon positions. Large numbers retreat in good order. Pikes out, forming squares, falling back to their separate fortified camp. But the Russian center is gone. Panic, rout. The hussar charge is not a single thundering wall. It's a tactical maneuver. They start slow, loose formation. Space to maneuver. Each hussar has roughly 6 feet. They tighten formation as they approach, accelerate, reach maximum speed in tightest formation just before impact. The lance outruns enemy pikes. The weight of horse and armor becomes kinetic energy. They don't impale every enemy. They crack open formations, psychologically annihilate them. The enemy breaks, then allied troops, light cavalry, other hussar companies, infantry, pour through the gap and finish it. The numbers don't compute until you understand what happened. This isn't medieval shock cavalry against unarmored peasants. These are professional soldiers with firearms and field fortifications. The Russians outnumber the Poles 5 to 1. They have prepared positions. They have European mercenaries who fought Swedish and German wars, and they collapse in 5 hours because the hussars refuse to stop charging. Maskiewicz writes that his unit is exhausted, damaged, bleeding, and they charge again and again. The relentlessness breaks the Russian will. You can't hold a position when cavalry keeps coming through musket smoke, lances shattered, sabers out, reforming and charging again before you can reload. Valuyev learns the relief force is destroyed. He surrenders without a fight. Żółkiewski negotiates terms. The Russian advance force walks away. 9 days later, the 7 boyars in Moscow depose Tsar Vasily IV. Too many defeats. Klushino broke him. The capital has no defender. Żółkiewski marches on Moscow with little opposition. He enters the Kremlin. The boyars negotiate. They proclaim Prince Władysław Wasa, son of King Zygmunt III, as the new Tsar of Russia. Władysław claims the title from 1610 to 1634. He never sits the throne. His father refuses to convert to Orthodoxy, refuses to let Władysław convert, refuses the terms the boyars demand. The deal collapses. But for a moment, a Polish prince is Tsar of all Russia because 6,000 cavalry destroyed 35,000 soldiers at Klushino. Żółkiewski brings Vasily Shuisky and his brothers to Warsaw as prisoners. October 29th, 1610, triumphal entry into Warsaw. Bells ring, crowds roar, muskets fire and salute. The hetman parades the deposed Tsar through the streets. Vasily Shuisky is forced to give homage to King Zygmunt III on his knees. The Polish king's chancellor thanks Żółkiewski in front of the assembly. Quote, "Fame will carry your name into distant posterity, for you have accomplished what was beyond strength and all expectation." End quote. Shuisky is held prisoner in Gostinin Castle. He dies there September 12, 1612, followed quickly by his brother Dmitry. The Romanovs elect Michael Romanov as Tsar in 1613, ending the time of troubles. They recognize Vasily Shuisky posthumously as a legal Tsar. It takes until 1635, the Treaty of Polianovka, for his remains to be returned to Moscow and buried in Archangel Cathedral. But Klushino remains, the victory that put Warsaw briefly in control of the Kremlin. The Hussars are the story, but understanding them requires understanding the evolution. They start as light Serbian cavalry in the early 1500s, exiled warriors from the Balkans, Hungarian Hussar. Polish treasury books from 1500 first record them, light cavalry. Lance, shield, saber, fast, expendable. They fight at Orsha in 1514 and Obertin in 1531, minor role. King Stefan Battery reforms them in the 1570s. He's Duke of Transylvania before becoming King of Poland. He standardizes equipment, longer lances, breastplate armor, no shields. They become heavy shock cavalry that can still move fast. The true Winged Hussar emerges. From 1574 to 1705, they're undefeated in major battles. Lubashew, 1577. Bygzina, 1588. Kokenhausen, 1601. Kirchholm, 1605. Klushino, 1610. Chocim, 1621. Martynów 1624, Trzciana 1629, Ochmatów 1644, Beresteczko 1651, Połąka 1660, Kodnów 1660, Kotin 1673, Lwów 1675, Vienna 1683, Parkany 1683. Vienna is the largest cavalry charge in history, 18,000 horsemen. But Klushino might be the most technically impressive, outnumbered 5-1, victory in 5 hours, 400 casualties versus 5,000. Each hussar is recruited from nobility, the szlachta, wealthy enough to afford equipment and horses. A Towarzysz Husarski companion commands his own poczet or kopia lance unit of 2 to 5 armed retainers plus servants. The servants tend horses, food, supplies, repairs, fodder, and often fight. Each banner, Korongiev, has 30 to 60 lances, sometimes more. The Rotmisters commands by contract. The Porucznik, lieutenant, commands in practice. One Charanji, ensign, carries the banner and can command if the lieutenant can't. Each banner has musicians, trumpeters, kettle drummers. The Rotmister's kopia is larger, has more trumpeters. There are other companions with specific duties during battle, keeping order, helping maneuvers. Their functions aren't fully understood from surviving records, but the structure means a single banner of 50 lances with 3 retainers. Each is 250 fighting men when servants are counted. Mobile, flexible, rich enough to maintain their own gear. It defines them. They don't charge in the tight-packed convoys of medieval knights. Loose formation, room to maneuver, direction changes mid-charge, overlapping movements. They can hit from one angle, wheel, reform, hit from another before the enemy reloads. The lances strike first, long reach. If fighting lighter opponents, Ottomans or Russians, the lance impales. Against heavy armor, it shatters and disrupts formation. Psychological weapon, then sabers and pistols and war hammers in close combat. They're trained for combined arms warfare. After hussars crack the formation, other cavalry and infantry exploit the break. Sometimes they dismount and assault on foot. Battle of Hodov, they defend against Tatars on foot. Rare, they're too expensive to waste in infantry combat. Training costs, equipment costs, horse costs. But in decisive moments of pitched battles, they're worth the expense. They break armies. The sight alone. Some accounts claim they whistle during charges, terrifying horses and men. Physics argues against audible sound in battle chaos, but the visual impact is certain. A wall of armored horsemen with feathered wings behind them, animal pelts on shoulders, lances longer than your pikes, charging at you knee to knee. That breaks morale before the impact. Add the polished armor reflecting sunlight, the bright heraldry. The pennons on lances, some 390 centimeters long, silk, crimson, and white, fluttering and snapping in the wind. 9 original pennons survive in the Polish Army Museum in Warsaw. 2 triangular late 17th century crimson and white with knight's crosses. 7 longer, single crimson field, knight's cross between crossed sabers and 2 vipers. Iconography shows other colors: green-red, blue-green, black-white, yellow-white, checkered, zigzag. The hussars want to be seen. They want the enemy to know what's coming. That's the point. You see death approaching, and you have 30 seconds to decide if you're brave enough to stand. Fast enough to catch light Tatar cavalry, strong enough to smash through heavy infantry. Selling a hussar horse outside the Commonwealth is a capital crime, sometimes called tarpon. Training takes years. The horse and rider are one unit. The rider needs both hands for lance and saber, which means controlling the horse with legs and weight shifts. Combat at full gallop, formation changes, sudden stops, reversals. The horse is as much a weapon as the lance. Its weight delivers the impact. Its training keeps the rider alive. At Klushino, the equipment proves itself. The hollow fur lances weigh 3 kilograms but reach 19 feet. They outreach Russian pikes. The armor stops musket balls at range. Up close, a musket punches through, but at charging distance, the hussars are moving too fast for accurate fire. The caracole tactic that fails for the Russian readers is European standard, but the hussars don't use it. They fire pistols once, then charge with steel. The raider fires, wheels, reloads, fires again. In theory, it maintains firepower without closing to melee. In practice, at Klushino, it means the raiders are caught in the turn when the hussars arrive with sabers. Massacre. The mercenaries on the right flank do better because they're infantry. Pikes out, defensive squares. Professional soldiers who know their business. They retreat in good order. But the center and left collapse because cavalry can't hold against hussars who keep charging. Shuisky never knows the Polish force is coming or how small it is. The night march on July 3rd arrives at Klushino before dawn. Russians are sleeping off food and vodka from the previous evening. Overconfident. No battle expected soon. Samuel Maskiewicz mocks them in his diary. Reports hearing an enemy officer shout, "Saddle the trousers and bring me my horse," in the chaos of the alarm. He couldn't have heard that from the far end of the battlefield, but the image captures the confusion. Russians stumble from sleep to find the Polish army forming up at the forest edge. Żółkiewski orders Prechistoye village burned, another hamlet, Pierniewo, torched, fences destroyed, clearing the approach. Then the charges begin. 5,500 hussars, 30,000 Russians under Dmitry Shuisky, Andrei Galitzin, Danilo Mazetsky, 5,000 mercenaries under de la Gardie, total 35,000. But Radosław Sikora, considered one of the world's leading hussar experts, argues the real Polish numbers at Klushino were lower. Żółkiewski divided his army multiple times during the campaign. At Tsaryovo Zaimiszcze, he left camp followers and less seasoned soldiers. Took 3,080 hussars, 850 light Cossack cavalry, 100 petty horsey light cavalry, 200 infantry, 2 guns. That's 4,230 on paper, minus 10% for usual attrition. 3,600 cavalry, 200 infantry. Under 4,000 total. Muscovite, who was there, writes the cavalry numbered 2,500, with infantry 2,700. Żółkiewski estimated enemy strength at 35,000 in 1610. Years later, writing his memoirs, he revises it to 48,000. 40,000 Muscovites, including camp followers who fought. 8,000 foreigners. If Muscovite is accurate, the odds are 2,700 against 48,000, nearly 18 to 1, and the Hussars won. Even taking conservative numbers, 6,500 against 35,000, the result is impossible by conventional military mathematics. 5 to 1 odds, fortified positions, professional mercenaries, firearms, and total collapse in 5 hours, 400 Polish casualties. 100 hussars, 5,000 Russian dead. The battlefield archaeology supports the slaughter. Mass graves, scattered weapons. The Russian army breaks so completely that by the time Żółkiewski returns to Tsaryovo Zaimiszcze, Waluyev surrenders immediately. No fight. He knows what happened at Klushino. The relief forces annihilated. Staying encircled is suicide. They need someone on the throne. Anyone. Poland offers Władysław. The boyars accept. For 2 years, from 1610 to 1612, Poland occupies Moscow. The only time in history a foreign power successfully holds the city until Napoleon tries and fails in 1812. The occupation doesn't last. Kuzma Minin and Dmitry Pożarski lead a popular uprising. Second Volunteer Army, they force the Polish garrison out in 1612. National Unity Day, November 4th, commemorates it. But those 2 years happened because of Klushino. Because 5,500 hussars charged fortified positions 8 to 10 times until the Russian army broke. Poland and Russia, united under Władysław, converted to Orthodoxy. The boyars agreed. King Zygmunt III vetoed it, wanted to rule Russia himself, wouldn't convert, wouldn't let his son convert. The deal dies. Żółkiewski resigns command in the east. He's given the southern frontier. Defense against Tatars and Turks. 1618, he's promoted to Hetman Wielki Korony, Grand Crown Hetman, the highest military rank, also Chancellor. But he's old, 73 in 1620, criticized for letting Tatars raid in 1618 at Ornin without fighting. The attack reaches Russia's border, but Żółkiewski negotiates instead of attacking. The nobles call it cowardice. He feels the stain on his honor. 1620, he leads a preemptive strike on Moldavia to install a friendly hospodar, Kasper Graziani. The campaign is poorly prepared, undersupplied. The army reaches Sikora. Battle starts September 19th, initial Polish success. Then, Graziani betrays them and joins the Turks. Disaster. Żółkiewski tries to withdraw. His private army troops and the irregular soldiers mutiny. They break the Tabor formation and flee. Turks and Tatars attack. Slaughter. Night of October 6th to 7th, the hetman is cut off. His officers beg him to escape. Stanisław Konik-Polski, his son Jan, a hussar named Złotopolski. He refuses, finally agrees. Mounts his horse, saber in hand, rides toward the border. Tatars catch him. He's killed fighting. Decapitated. His head is sent to Constantinople. His body is left on the field. The man who conquered Moscow dies in a Moldavian swamp because his own soldiers panicked. He's 73 and he dies the way he wanted, on the battlefield, sword in hand. But it's a waste. The greatest hetman Poland produces, killed in an unnecessary war because of wounded pride. Hussars break the Cossack forces. By Vienna 1683, they're past their prime, but they still lead the largest cavalry charge in history. 18,000 horsemen under King John III Sobieski smash into the Ottoman lines. The siege breaks, Vienna is saved. But after Vienna, infantry firearms improve. Muskets become rifles. Cavalry charges become suicidal. The Hussars transform. By 1776, parliamentary decree ends them. Their traditions pass to Ochlands. They remain in parade uniforms, but not as combat units. The 18th century kills them the way it kills all heavy cavalry. But between 1574 and 1705, they're undefeated. 131 years. Dozens of major battles. Klushino stands as their technical masterpiece. Not the largest, not the longest, but the most lopsided victory against professional opposition. The sources here include the Stanisław Żółkiewski memoir, Początek i Progres Wojny Moskiewskiej, first published 1612, which provides the commander's own tactical analysis of Klushino, and the archaeological excavation reports from the battlefield site near Smolensk, published in Military Historical Journal Volume 48, Issue 3, July 2010, which document mass grave locations, weapon fragments, and battlefield topology that confirm the historical accounts of the charge vectors and casualty distribution. Now back to the information. The battlefield today is agricultural land, flat fields. The village of Klushino is tiny in Russia, not far from the border with Belarus, 150 kilometers west of Moscow. The graves are still there, unmarked. The fence line is gone. The rivers Vdovka and Gzhat still run. Locals know the history, but it's not celebrated. For Russia, Klushino is a humiliation. The time of troubles is a national wound. Foreign occupation, civil war, false czars. Famine that killed a third of the population between 1601 and 1603. Klushino sits in the middle of that chaos, the battle that opened Moscow to Polish troops. For Poland, it's remembered on the tomb of the unknown soldier in Warsaw. Inscription: Kłuczyn, Moskwa to settlement, 28 to 8, 1610. July 2nd to August 28th, the campaign dates. From the battle to the entry into Moscow, it's Poland's golden age moment, the Commonwealth at peak power, the Hussars at peak effectiveness, the military and political strength that led a nation of 15 million contest with empires of 40 million. The tactical lessons from Klushino are studied in military academies: cavalry shock value, psychological warfare, morale destruction, the importance of leadership, Żółkiewski's night march, his ruse at Saryovo Zaimiszcze, his decision to charge fortified positions instead of waiting, the relentlessness of the charges. Muscovite writes that his unit is damaged, exhausted, bleeding, and they charge again. Modern analysts compare it to steppe nomad tactics, Mongols, Tatars, but the Hussars are heavy cavalry, not light horse archers. They're combining the shock of medieval knights with the mobility of steppe cavalry. The combination, for about 130 years, is unstoppable. They lose individual skirmishes. They lose when they're dismounted or besieged. But in open field, pitched battles with room to charge, they don't lose. Klushino is the proof, 5 to 1 odds. Professional opposition, fortified positions, victory in 5 hours. These are nobles, men from wealthy families. Each one represents years of training, expensive equipment, a household of retainers. 100 dead is a significant loss for the Commonwealth. The Russian 5,000 dead are catastrophic. That's not just soldiers. It's brothers, fathers, sons from across Muscovy. The mercenaries who escape in good order lose comrades. De la Gardie's force is shattered. The Swedish-Russian alliance collapses after Klushino. Sweden pulls out. Russia is alone. The diplomatic consequences last decades. Poland occupies Moscow. Sweden takes Novgorod and tries to install a Swedish prince as Tsar. Both fail. But for 2 years, the Russian throne is contested by foreign powers because Vasily Shuisky's army was destroyed at Klushino. The famine of 1601 to 1603 killed hundreds of thousands. The time of troubles as a whole, wars, famines, rebellions, kills perhaps 2 million out of 15 million Russians. Klushino is one battle, but it's the battle that breaks the Russian military and lets Poland march unchallenged to Moscow. Artists paint them. Writers celebrate them. They become symbols of Polish military glory. Romantic nationalist movements in the 19th century idealized them. The reality is more complex. They're expensive. Only the wealthy can afford to be hussars. They require open terrain and room to charge. In forests, mountains, sieges, they're less effective. By the late 17th century, they're increasingly ceremonial. But in their era, 1570 to 1700, they're the most effective cavalry in Europe. The statistics prove it. Over 16 major battles, they win. Lubuszu. Byczyna. Kochenhausen, Kirchholm, Klushino, Chocim, Martynów, Trzciana, Ochmatów, Beresteczko, Połonka, Cudnów, Khotyn, Lwów, Vienna, Parkany. That's not luck. That's doctrine, training, equipment, tactics, the charge, the morale effect, the relentlessness, the refusal to stop. Klushino is commemorated in Poland but not well known internationally. Vienna, 1683, gets the attention. The largest cavalry charge, the siege lifted, Europe saved from Ottoman expansion. But Klushino is technically more impressive. Smaller numbers, worse odds, same result. Total victory. The Hussars at Klushino face modern for the era infantry with firearms behind fortifications, and they win anyway by charging until the enemy breaks. That's not medieval warfare. It's early modern combined arms warfare with cavalry shock as the decisive element. And it works because the Hussars are willing to charge 8 to 10 times in 5 hours, because they're skilled enough to reform mid-battle, because their equipment, horses, and training are superior, because Żółkiewski knows how to deploy them. The Hetman's memoir, Początek I Progres Wojny Moskiewskiej, Beginning and Progress of the Muscovite War, is one of the great military texts of the era. He writes it in 1612 after the Moscow campaign, partly to explain his actions, partly to argue his case against King Zygmunt, who rejected the Union deal, partly to teach future generations. He writes clearly, no boasting, just facts, numbers, terrain, decisions, the charge sequences, why he divided his forces, how he kept Valiev in place while attacking Shuisky. The memoir is a tactical textbook. Later writers compare it to Caesar's Gallic Wars. Sparse prose, precise detail, educational intent. Żółkiewski wants posterity to learn from Klushino. He succeeds. The memoir is still studied. Polish officers read it. Russian officers read it to understand their defeat. Historians read it because it's a primary source from the commander who won. The damaged armor, the repeated charges. His unit charges 8 to 10 times. He records that, not as boast, as fact. They charge, reform, charge again. The enemy fires. Some hussars fall. They charge again. That's discipline. That's training. That's the hussar doctrine. You don't stop until the enemy breaks. At Klushino, the enemy breaks, but it takes hours, 10 charges, hundreds of casualties. The hussars pay in blood for the victory. Muscovite survives. He writes it all down. His diary is published in 1609, but the Klushino entries are from 1610. He adds them later. The manuscript ends up in Wrocław. Published in 1961 as Pamiętniki Samuela I Bogusława Kazimierza Moskwiewiczów, Memoirs of Samuel and Bogusław Kazimierz Moskwewicz. It's one of the few hussar first-hand accounts from Klushino. Most sources are commanders' reports. Moskwewicz is a soldier. His perspective is different, more visceral, more immediate. He's there when the caracole fails and the hussars butcher the writers. He's there when the mercenaries finally retreat. He's there when the Russian center collapses. His testimony corroborates Żółkiewski's memoir and fills in details the hetman doesn't include. Battlefield excavations in the 2000s find mass graves near the former Russian camp locations, weapon fragments, pike heads, saber pieces, musket balls. The graves contain hundreds of remains, hasty burials, after-battle cleanup. The bone analysis shows trauma consistent with cavalry charges. Crushed skulls from warhammer impacts, severed limbs from saber cuts, puncture wounds from lances. The distribution of remains maps to the described collapse of the Russian left and center. Most dead are found in the area between the fence line and the camp. That's where the rout happened. Where the hussars broke through and the Russians fled and were cut down from behind. The mercenary position on the right shows fewer remains. They retreated in good order. Professional soldiers who knew when to withdraw. The Polish casualties are harder to find. 400 dead, but they controlled the field after the battle. They likely buried their own properly. Russian dead were left until locals buried them in mass graves. Standard practice after battles. Winners bury their own with honor. Losers get pits. The Battle of Klushino destroys the Russian field army. Vasily Shuisky's regime collapses. The Seven Boyars, the ruling council, depose him days after learning the news. They need a new czar. They need stability. They need to stop the Polish advance. Offering the throne to Władysław is desperation. A Polish Catholic prince as Orthodox Tsar of all Russia is unthinkable under normal circumstances. But 1610 is not normal. Moscow has endured false Dmitry I. Vasily Shuisky's coup, false Dmitry II's siege from Tushino, Swedish intervention, Polish invasion, famine, revolts. Klushino is the breaking point. The army is gone. The capital is undefended. Żółkiewski is marching. The boyars choose survival over pride. They offer the crown to Władysław with conditions. Convert to orthodoxy, respect Russian law, rule with the boyars' council. It's a constitutional monarchy offer. Władysław likely would have accepted. He's 16 years old in 1610, ambitious. The Russian throne is bigger than the Polish crown, but his father refuses. Zygmunt III wants Russia for himself. Or he wants his son on the throne as a Polish puppet, not as an independent Russian czar. The negotiations fail. Władysław claims the title for 24 years, but never rules. The Polish garrison in Moscow is besieged in 1611. They surrender in 1612. The time of troubles ends with the election of Michael Romanov in 1613. The Romanov dynasty rules until 1917. But for 2 years, because of Klushino, Poland holds Moscow. Polish nationalism in the 19th century, during the partitions when Poland doesn't exist as a state, seizes on hussars as symbols of past glory. Klushino becomes legendary. The numbers inflate. 6,000 becomes 4,000, becomes 2,000. 35,000 becomes 40,000, becomes 50,000. The victory becomes more miraculous with each retelling. Russian sources downplay it, emphasize the Civil War chaos, the treason of mercenaries, the incompetence of Shuisky, anything except admitting the hussars were simply better. Soviet-era historians barely mention it. Celebrating a Polish victory over Russians doesn't fit the narrative. Post-Soviet scholarship is more honest, acknowledges the defeat, studies the tactics, tries to learn. Modern Polish and Russian historians mostly agree on the facts now. 6,000 to 7,000 Poles, 30,000 to 35,000 Russians. 5-hour battle. Total Polish victory. 400 casualties versus 5,000. Tactical brilliance by Żółkiewski. Relentless charges by hussars. Russian morale collapse. Military disaster that opens Moscow to occupation. Where the mass graves are. Archaeology doesn't lie. The battle happened. The slaughter happened. The hussars won. The rest is interpretation. But the facts are clear. July 4th, 1610. 6,000 cavalry destroy 35,000 infantry and cavalry in 5 hours through superior training, equipment, tactics, and sheer relentless aggression. That's Klushino. That's the day Winged Hussars proved they were the deadliest cavalry Europe had produced in centuries. The legacy extends beyond Poland. The tactic influences cavalry doctrine across Europe. The psychological impact of appearance, the importance of mobility combined with shock, the value of elite troops worth their cost. Armies study the hussars. Some try to copy them. Hungarian hussars are different. Lighter, faster, less armor. French hussars emerge in the 18th century. Also light cavalry, none match the Polish model. The specific combination, heavy armor plus long lance plus trained horse plus noble rider plus doctrine of relentless charge, is uniquely Polish-Lithuanian. It works for 130 years until technology obsoletes it. But while it works, it's unstoppable. Klushino is the proof. Stanisław Żółkiewski's words are carved on his tomb. Kiedyś powstanie z kości naszych mściciel. Someday an avenger will rise from our bones. Prophecy or wishful thinking. His descendant, Jan III Sobieski, wins at Vienna in 1683, the Hussars' last great victory. 73 years after Klushino, the charge at Vienna is larger, the stakes higher. Vienna falls, maybe Europe falls to the Ottomans, but Klushino is the technical masterpiece, the impossible victory. The battle that should have been a slaughter but became a triumph because 6,000 men refused to lose. Samuel Maskiewicz tightens his straps, checks his lance. Third time this hour. The horse stamps, knows what's coming. Across the field, 35,000 Russians behind fences. Muskets ready, pikes bristled, confident. Look at the numbers. Look at the fortifications. They've already won. Then Hetman Żółkiewski gives the order. The wings roll forward. Slow at first, gathering speed, tightening, faster. Knee to knee. Lance tips forward. The ground shakes. The pennons snap. The Russians fire. Smoke, noise. Men fall. The charge doesn't stop, can't stop, won't stop. The lances hit the fences. Wood splinters. Men scream. Horses crash through. Sabers flash. The line breaks. They reform. Charge again. 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 8 times. 10 times. Until there's nothing left to charge. Until the field is theirs and 35,000 is 5,000 and the rest are running toward Moscow, knowing the hussars are coming.